tonight, the discussion will be called When Shelter in Place is No Shelter. And we are privileged to be joined by three great panelist contributors. Beckie Masaki, who, doesn't really need an introduction, but Beckie is the co-founder and former director of the Asian Women's Shelter, co-founder and former co-director of the API Institute on Gender-Based Violence. Emily Chum, Director of Social Services for Self-Help for the Elderly. And Jean Pham, who is the Social Service Youth Project Manager at API Legal Outreach. Thank you so much for joining us and taking your time to be involved with our conversation tonight. Beckie, the United Nations all the way to local counties have studied and reported that family violence, violence against women, violence against older adults, teen violence have all increased because of the shelter at home kind of situation that we've been forced into over the last 8 months. Maybe you could start us off by some thoughts around this kind of impossible pressing issue that we face.
Yes. Thank you for inviting me and really having this important and so timely conversation. For domestic violence and human trafficking, survivors of that have expressed they're trapped in the place that they're living, whether it's their home or among others in the living space. They were trapped by violence. And their lifeline or a way would be the way that we would help them to escape the violent home and create and be at Asian Women's Shelter or other safe place kinds of shelters or homes or safe spaces. Now, during this shelter in place COVID time, it can be a very healthy and wonderful place if your family is safe and this is a safe place for you to be. However, if you already had those dynamics of violence and the abuse of power, even more so, you're isolated and trapped, ironically, in your own home. I was thinking also a typical and common situation, especially in our API communities, is extended family, right? And so we all live in the same building or the same home, whether it's also for economics or also just by choice. This is a comfortable and typical way to live. Now, extended family can be a lifeline to interrupt violence. If one of the family is being violent to the others, such as in domestic violence or child abuse or teen abuse towards the family, elder abuse, that can be interrupted in a healthy family. And that is what I'm asking and reminding everybody. However, if there is maybe a particular person that's causing harm and everybody in that family either ignores it or also contributes to that scapegoating or targeting of somebody for harm, then it actually, ironically, extended family becomes even more the dangerous kinds of shelter in place and magnified by shelter in place. So I feel like this is an alert and a wake-up call for all of us that this is a time where we need to be paying attention to our own spectrum of the way that we are in our houses, because even the most healthy of us sometimes it does get a little irritating or crowded for everybody to be all in a small space together. So even in the small ways, it's time to like open up, be patient, find ways that we have our own space, even if we are in the same house, just some alone time and together like that.
Mhm.
But also being mindful. And I feel like that I can talk about later too, but I want to move to the other folks. But that is another thing, you know, I was thinking that all of us can pay more attention to our neighbors. We're all in shelter in place. And I even heard a recent story where a neighbor kept checking in on a survivor, somebody who was experiencing violence in her home, who was the next door neighbor. And that neighbor said, "Oh, here's some food, put it on their porch, or come and get some. I just made some, you know, baked goods, come over." And that person was very isolated and would not come over, would not come over. But find the neighbor just kept saying, "Come over, come over." And then the woman did come over, and that's where she disclosed what was happening and felt like she was in a safe place. And that was a way that she was able to escape from violence, even here in shelter in place. So that's just one story and something for all of us to think about how we are in community and in our own families.
Emily, do you want to give us some thoughts and some reflections on older adults that are in difficult situations because of the shelter in place?
Yes, absolutely. Currently, during COVID, a lot of seniors have been reported they're facing a lot of mental health conditions where the anxiety, depression has increased. A lot of that has been done by the social isolation because of the COVID. Because of this increase of social isolation, they're more dependent on their family members, depending on their caregivers. So a lot of the this will be some factors that contribute to the increase of elder abuse because like social programs like senior centers and other regular programs that they adult day health that they used to be able to attend, and now they are all only limited in services where that serve as a gateway for identified elder abuse. So as they become more rely on others, their self-esteem has decreased as well. So that's a way for the elder abuse to happen when the caregiver might have financial abuse, scams, they lack of someone to check into like they used to. So that we have a lot of neglect and emotional abuse and financial scams. Actually, it's from someone that they know or someone that's taking care of them. So we want to be able to let the senior know that seek help and accept help, and knowing that to identify a trust person, family members, friends, or the local community members, that in case anything happen, they can report to us. And at many times, they seniors a little bit reluctant to report to others, and they trying to not to disclose too much issues to others. But we want to continue to promote that awareness among the seniors and the general public to identify their emotions even through the phone, because recently many community programs are providing virtual services as well. Staying socially connected, it's a good way to identify elder abuse, as we can see right now.
Go ahead, Gene.
Thanks, Dean. First of all, thanks for inviting me to participate. I feel like I'm in this conversation table with giants in the community who are doing a lot of really great work. I think, the reason I was asked here is to speak in the perspective of youth, especially as youth who may be facing more precarious situations during the shelter in place. I think Beckie and Emily both raised both really amazing points that relate to how youth are experiencing maybe heightened violence during the shelter in place orders as well. Beckie mentioned that many API families are multi-generational, and I think with that comes with a lack of privacy. Um, when I think of the type of youth who are connected to our services, the ones who are seeking support, there's like a few handful of truths that we've kind of picked up down the line. One of them is that domestic violence in the home, may not always be violence that's inflicted upon the person itself. It can be violence that they're witnessing in the home. If spouses are arguing in a very violent manner, the child or youth witnesses that and they internalize it. And this type of trauma, is enacted and part of their development process as a young person, as a youth. So I think one thing that we have to consider as practitioners and as people in our community is broadening our perception of what domestic violence is really, and how it can affect people who may be bystanders or dependents. Another aspect is, like I think Emily had mentioned, people who are abusers in a situation tend to be someone that and this is information that we constantly share within our circles, that usually there's I think this mythology that an abuser is someone random. It's someone that you don't know. When the reality is, you probably have a relationship with them. And when we talk about domestic violence, ultimately we define it as a relationship of power, seeking control. And so under shelter in place, there is this sense of almost double jeopardy, where there is a lack of control where you can go, right? Because young people may, in other situations, when we weren't in shelter in place, may have, saw extracurriculars. They may have gone to their friends. They may have gone to internship or work as a refuge, as a second home to escape these forms of violence. That may no longer exist as an option. So that form of control, is taken away from them. And so I think, especially now, one of the major questions we've been dealing with this year within Appeal, within our youth project, is how can we better support young people? How can we support their mental health? How can we provide alternative gateways for them to seek and access help? And I feel this is, I don't pretend that COVID hasn't been hard on us as people who deliver social services, and so this is kind of a process where we're asking questions and trying to find answers together within these different community groups. But I think as Beckie showed and illuminated through her story, the process of community building is always, I think, the best solution. In terms of helping people get help, and also fighting away from that feeling of isolation, of being alone.
Thank you. So you all have talked about different aspects of family violence or interpersonal violence. I mean, do you see any crossover between domestic violence, elder abuse, and the teen violence?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, thank you for inviting the three of us. And, it is all interconnected, right? It's intergenerational violence. And whether it's within a family or the way we are in communities. And it's makes it even more important now for us to have that interconnectedness.
Right. When I think about how these different issue groups are related to each other in terms of youth issues, elder issues, and domestic violence. I think a lot of the solutions I feel are very connected in terms of what does it take for a survivor? What does it take for a youth? What does it take for an elderly person, an elder to you know be at a place where they can seek help, or at a place where all their needs are met, right? For me, it's addressing their basic needs in terms of having a safe home. And like, Becky and Emily has shared, I think mental health is just this huge, encompassing, cloud, during COVID, that, I'm really glad that, practitioners that's in the forefront of their minds. They're thinking about how can we address mental health as a root issue? How can we make people feel empowered to seek services? How can we make people, feel like there is hope? And sometimes that can be like the hardest thing, especially when we check the news and it's really, really, in a sense, depressing all the time. So I really feel like another part of our work, at Apilo, at AWS, and through self-help is, providing a sense of hope for the people in the communities that we serve. Within the work that, I do at Apilo, I think one thing that I have always noticed is, the resilience of youth, and also how savvy youth are, and how just in the know and how much they want to help. I think the main focus of our internship at Apilo for high schoolers is engaging with domestic violence and preventing it. And that's one of the, I think, the greatest things that come out of Apilo, that we have this multifaceted way of tackling violence in our communities, both by providing direct essential services, social and legal services, but also on a preventative aspect, trying to use education as a gateway to teach young people about how the cycle of violence occurs and how to stop it and how to recognize it.
Emily, maybe I can start with you. This question has to do with mandated reporters. So mandated reporters includes people at schools, churches, childcare centers, and senior centers. And as you mentioned before, most of those services are closed. And so there's no access for seniors. Are there any ideas of teaming up with other service providers that have access, like Meals on Wheels or meal delivery services? I know that self-help is very active in delivering meals to seniors throughout the city. Do you have any thoughts on that possibility in terms of reaching out for to address elder abuse issues?
Yes, definitely. Since shelter in place, we have been concerned about the seniors who are isolated. So that's why when we have our meals program, we conduct wellness calls, and also our seniors that's in our programs. Other programs, we conduct frequent wellness call, and then to make sure that to identify clients have food, shelters, and clothing, and also if they have enough assistance at home, what is their arrangement and caregiving at home. So that's why wellness call is very important, and we continue to do so. And we identify a few actually abused. Like one of the case, the client is very cheerful the first a few times when we talk to her, but then eventually the more we talk to her after a several wellness call, she start to disclose that there's abuse at home, that she planned to commit suicide. So I think the wellness call is something we would like to do, and if we can bring that to like a policy level, and make wellness call as a mandate for the programs to do. And but in the meantime, we're still doing that to all of our seniors. And the senior centers, even though it's closed for the activities, but it's still open for pickup meals. So the seniors can actually go pick up meals, and there's staff serving the meals every day. That's one way to stay connected as well. But definitely, I think wellness call is very essential right now, because a lot of times the abuse usually won't disclose until you have the relationship with the clients. So we started an internship in our department. So we have the intern to make regular phone calls to clients that we think there's abuse, but not yet. So we will keep doing that. So.
Oh, yeah. I just noticed that there's a question about making our resources more accessible. I do want to highlight that at Apilo for our youth program, we do have a confidential text line. And it's one of the ways in which we're able to help young people. If they don't want to make themselves known, if for example, they can't be on the phone because the walls are thin, you have family around, you don't want them to know your business. So I do want to highlight that, and it's on our website too, I believe.
So Emily and Beckie, so the question is really, are there resources where survivors who do not want to disclose their identity can get assistance, like an anonymous helpline or other services where they do not have to give personal information?
Yes, certainly. That was the hotline, which is still there at Asian Women's Shelter. And so that is a number that folks can always call. And also, what we've noticed is in these virtual times, people do get together for Zoom or another kinds of groups. And so, in that, it can also be a place where folks can do a confidential, private message or a signal that helps the the folks know that they need some confidential help. Yeah.
Emily, you reminded us that seniors especially do not want to disclose any type of abuse. It's almost like uh, really against our culture as APIs. Is there some method that you use to encourage, the seeking of help? Is there a way that seniors can reach out to you without disclosing their identity?
Yes, if they report to us and they requested to be confidential, and all the information they provided will be confidential. Yes.
Mhm.
This is a very large and difficult question, but I think the question really is in regards to API survivors of all forms of interpersonal violence. How do we take into account the culture and the language requirements of survivors in providing the services that you all provide? And what is it that we've been able to do to kind of respect the fact that people speak other languages and have other cultural backgrounds that may impact the services that we need to provide?
Yeah, I can go. This is Becky. I mean, that is the whole reason why we started the MLAM project when we opened Asian Women's Shelter, is to recruit and train and pay bilingual advocates, and that they're paid on an on-call basis. Many of them have keep growing and gone on to be staff at AWS. So we have that whole array of staff, bilingual staff, as well as team partners with on-call language advocates. And that is why we can address all of the language, just a wide array of languages. What I think it's over 40, probably, and growing and more.
Yeah, I really resonate with all these things that Becky is mentioning about the intentions of our institutions in the first place, the people that we serve, and the reasons for the genesis of our organizations. it was really to fill in a gap that we didn't have before in terms of, what does it mean for as an API survivor to be connected to legal resources where they can access help in their own language that they can understand. The law is, already very hard to understand. As just an everyday person, much less when you have to translate it. And so, like another thing I constantly think about is the community is so important, and also being adaptive, being multifaceted in ways that all these organizations are, is important because we aren't single issue people. Most of the time when people come with issues, there are other issues attached to it. For example, an API survivor who may have a precarious legal status, who is worried that her abuser or their abuser is hanging over their head. What does it mean for them to receive help on both a domestic violence standpoint, but also an immigration standpoint? These are the unique ways that, our organizations at Apilo, AWS, and Self Help, we're the bridge in these communities. And so, when I think of what is the best way to give help to the community at large, it's helping people who are the most vulnerable in our populations. And if the most vulnerable person in our communities can receive full, you know, comprehensive help and support, then what does that speak for the rest of the community? And so I feel that's a vantage point from which we all need to work from and imagine our work from a place where, we are within our communities and we really represent the people that we are trying to support.
Once again, I want to thank this great panelist group, and thank you all for joining us. Please remember that you can stream or look at this program on demand, and you can invite others to view it. I thought it was a very excellent discussion with our great panelists, and thank you for joining us. Good night.